Today, we're going to be going over a basic composite. And essentially, a basic composite means combining two different elements together. We're going to take a baseball field, we're going to cut it out and add a better sky into the background. And then using adjustment layers, we're going to blend those two elements together. This is going to be very simple. What we're going to do is we're going to go out, use this baseball field, and we're going to extract the fence and the grass and use that as our basic foundation. We're going to add a sky to the background and do some toning and blending to kind of pull it together. So to start off, let's zoom in here a little bit closer. There are a variety of ways I can start this selection. So I want to select this fence, the scoreboard, and the field. There are a whole lot of ways. Basically, any type of way you can visually see that it's different, you can select that way. So I can select it through color, I can select it through contrast. There's 1,000 different ways you can make selections in Photoshop. What we're going to do is kind of start off and take a step back and go old school and use the pen tool. If you're up in the newest version of CC, the select and mask is going to be a beautiful thing and a great tool to use. But I want to start off with a good foundation and just kind of explain how extractions work for now, and then we'll get into the refinements and small details later on. So looking at this, I'm going to zoom in and we're going to start off on this far corner. I'm going to use the pen tool. The quick key for the pen tool is just P, and this is the symbol for the pen tool. There are other options in this drop down box, but we're going to start off with the pen tool. If I click on an area, what happens is it creates a point. And then the next point I click on, it's going to connect those two dots. So I'm going to connect it all the way over to there. If I zoom in super close, you can see the fence isn't quite straight. It dips down a little bit. I can either fix this now or later. I'm going to fix this later here. We're going to, just for now, I'm going to go around and create the points all around the object here. So I'm going to go all the way to the top here, across the scoreboard. And the more time I take and the closer I zoom in, the more perfect it would be. So depending on your needs and how important it is that it's perfect, you can zoom in super close, or you can stay out further and create a rough selection. I'm somewhat creating a rough selection. It's not exactly perfect, but you certainly get the idea. Now I'm going to leave the lights out of here for now. And I'm going to create points as I go around there. Actually, I'm going to create one long point and then transition it later. I'm going to go all the way over to here. You can see it definitely didn't follow the curve of that, but I will be able to adjust the curve of it in a bit here. So I'm going to pull it all the way off to the side here and go past it. So what I did is I just switched up my view. So to switch up your view, right now I can't navigate past the edge of my Photoshop document. If I click out here, nothing will happen. I want to create a full screen so I can pull it off to the side and see to the very edge of my Photoshop document. So to do that, I can toggle between screens by hitting F. So right now this is full screen. If I hit F one more time, it makes all of the tools disappear so you can just see the image. So I'm going to go back to that second key, F key there. And now if I hold my space bar down and drag to the side, you can see how I can see all the way past the edge of my Photoshop document. So that last spot I clicked in wasn't quite perfect. Now that's better. And I can draw actually points outside my Photoshop document now. So now I'm going to go ahead and just select wide so I don't err and cut off any of the grass or edge of the field that I don't want. And I come up here and then I'll connect this last one. Sometimes it's hard to get it in the right point. You can see when I go over top exactly, it has that little circle symbol on the pen tool. So now as I zoom out, you can see how I have this line all the way around there. And now I can refine some of these curves a little bit better. So if I zoom in to one of these curves, to one of these points here, you can see if I hold Alt or Option down, it's going to change the symbol to this little greater than, less than symbol. It's a little arrow tool. And as I pull out on the point, it creates these curves that I can morph and transition. So if I grab one of these, I can on the outside point, I can control each one of them separately. Now you can see how it's going to follow the curve of that fence a little bit better. Let's go to this other one. This is a major one here, a big one. And I'm going to use this key, this point right here. So if I keep pulling, I'm going to do this one more time to show you. I get super in close. Hold Alt or Option down and start pulling out here. Well, if I keep pulling this out, it's actually affecting two different points here. You can see how it's affecting this little point here where I change direction on the fence there, and it's making a big curve out that way. If I start pulling just a little bit and then let go, hold that shift down again and just pull on one corner of it instead of both corners. I'm just going to pull on this one corner and modify that down here. Right about there. Looks pretty good how it follows the curve of that fence. So this is how extractions used to have to be done back in very old versions of Photoshop, and this is the way some people still do it. The magic wand tool, the quick selection tool, the refined edge, and the newest select and mask are beautiful tools to use to select something. So now that I have this around here, this path created, I'm going to bring up my path windows. So I'm going to go down to Windows and Paths. So you can see I have a working path here now. If I right click on this, I can say Make Selection. It's going to turn it into a selection. It's going to ask me my feather radius. I am going to feather this just a slight amount, and why I'm doing that is because this edge along here is kind of soft. It's not a exact hard edge that it's in the distance. It's a slight bit blurry, so I don't want it to be a super crisp edge. So I'm going to feather it just a very slight amount on this. The next thing I want to do is create a selection. So I'm going to navigate back out of my full screen by hitting F again until it navigates back to the screen I want, and the layers are up. Now I'm going to create a mask. I'm going to click on this little layer here, and it's going to create a mask on this background and make the sky disappear. Now this is on its own layer, but since it's a mask, nothing has been destroyed. It's still there. So if I paint with white on this mask area here, I can bring back anything I want. So I can bring, if I later on decide I want to put that pole in there or something, or trees in there, I can do that. Or if I made a bad selection on the fence, I can refine this mask at any point I want to. So eventually we're going to drop a sky into this background. But first, I want to talk about making some of these players disappear. So I'm going to kind of shut off a few of these paths that are things that I don't need anymore. And hit Control O so I see the full version here, or Command O if you're in a Mac. There are 5 guys I want to make disappear out of this image, and to do that there's a variety of different ways I can select and clone these guys. I can use my patch tool, I can use my stamp tool, I can cut and paste sections and drag over top of them. We're going to use a few of them just so you can see the different techniques of doing that. So to start off with, I'm going to use my patch tool. And that's J. The quick key is J for patch tool. What I'm going to do is make sure I'm selected on the image here and not the mask. I'm going to draw a selection around them. And now as I pull it over to a different area, you can see how it's showing me what part of it's going to replace. So if I have it down too low, the fence is going to go into the grass. If I have it up high, the grass is going to go in the fence. So I'm going to align all those little portions, and I can even align some of the lines of the vertical lines of the fence to make it fit. It's not bad. I'm going to replace this guy here. Something right about there. Navigate over using my space bar, which brings up the hand tool, and I can drag across. And then if I'm holding that space bar down to zoom in, quick key here. So I have on my patch tool, right? Hold the space bar down to navigate around. To zoom in further, I'm going to hit Control or Command, and it brings up my zoom tool. So it's a quick way to navigate between 3 different tools very quickly. So as soon as I let go of all those keys, it goes right back to my patch tool. I'm going to make a selection around this guy here, drag it over, something right about there. And I get Control or Command D to deselect that selection then. One more time here, circling, dragging over, and Control or Command D to deselect. I zoom out by holding Control, Spacebar, and Alt. So lots of quick keys. I can also just hit Z for my zoom tool and then hold Alt down. But this way, as soon as I let go of that, it will navigate or automatically pop back to that patch tool then. So again, the zoom, to zoom out quickly, Control Alt Spacebar, Command Option Spacebar, and it brings that up. And you can even see on the screen right now, so it shows you Control Alt is the quick keys I'm holding down, and then Mac would be Command Option, and then the spacebar. So this last guy, we're going to use a different technique for him. We could try using the patch tool, but instead I'm going to cut and paste a section of this and then stamp in his feet, just so you can see those two different options. So I'm going to use my lasso tool, my polygonal lasso tool, and I'm going to be selected on this background layer, and I'm going to select the fence. Here, there, and there. Make sure I hold Control down or Command down, and I'll click on that last spot to connect that. Now I'm going to copy and paste, Control or Command C, Control or Command V, creates a copies and pastes it, and now I can drag this over top him. But you can see it's not quite the same height as the old fence. There's two different layers of this fence here, so I'm going to drag this up here, holding Control or Command T to bring up my transform tools. And now I'm going to drag this out a little bit there and make sure it lines up. That's pretty good. Now I have the fence duplicated here and covering him up, but I have his feet. The next thing I want to do is show you how to use the stamp tool. So for stamp tool, I'm just going to hit S for my stamp tool, and I'm going to zoom in and closer using my Control and Spacebar, Command and Spacebar. Allows me to zoom in. Now just holding my spacebar down, I can navigate left and right. So now I can see a close-up version of this field here. I want to stamp in the field. I'm going to make sure I'm selected on the layer I want to stamp. So I want to stamp this grass, not more of the fence. So I'm going to stamp on the grass. And I'm going to hold Alt or Option down, and it's going to bring up this little bullseye tool. And that's going to tell me exactly where I want to stamp from. So I want to stamp from maybe up closer to the top of the fence. So it's going to replicate that shadow from the fence. And then navigate over here, and you can see how it's going to replicate that. Now as I start painting, it's pulling it in there. Now as I go down, this little mark on the grass, this lighter line, kind of got off. If it would bother me, I can just reselect that area it's stamping from. So hold Alt or Option down again, click in the spot you want it to, and make sure it lines up, and then stamp that back in if it was a problem. However, just solid green grass will be fine in this portion. Maybe a little bit more of a shoe. Use the right bracket key to make my brush a little bit smaller. So now we've successfully cloned out and made all those other athletes disappear. Now let's bring in a sky. So I have a wide variety of stock images I photographed over the years. And this is one of my skies. And so I'm going to take this sky and add it to this other document. There's a variety of ways you can do that. I can simply click and drag over top, and you can see how it creates a little plus sign over there. As you can see how it's going to add that to the other document. I can drag this layer, this whole layer, the thumbnail layer, over top of the document here, and it'll add it to it that way too. Or I can Control A, which is selects everything, or Command A, Command or Control C, Command, and then paste it into this layer, Command or Control V. So there's a few different ways that this can be added in there. Any way you want to get this image over to the other image, whatever you want to do there. So now you can see how the sky, this layer of the sky is currently over top of the layer of the field. I'm going to drag the sky layer down underneath and let go, and it goes behind. And now looking at it, I want the sun a little bit higher in the sky. So I'm going to bring this up, just push up using my move tool until I start seeing too much. So that line of trees isn't bad. I could leave that up there if I wanted to, or leave it just sky. I think I'm just gonna leave it sky just so I don't have anything distracting back there. Sometimes I'll put trees back there or whatever. We're gonna keep it simple. So now I have a beautiful sky and a cool baseball field. However, they don't quite blend together. So I wanna talk next about blending. So the next step on this process is I want to blend the sky and the field together. Right now the sky has some very contrasty clouds. The fence is very bright up here. I want to darken that down, maybe darken some of the grass down and bring in the colors a little bit warmer so it matches up to that kind of late afternoon sunset light. So let's start off with that. Right now we have the field and the fence. These are two different layers. So if I shut this off, you can see how there's a fence layer here. I'm going to actually group those together because they belong together. So anything I do to those two things, I want to the rest of the fence in the field, I also want to affect this layer. And I could flatten it together, but just in case for some reason I want it separate, or to use it as an example of having separate elements that you want to blend together, I'm going to click on both of them by holding, I have one selected, I'm going to hold Shift, click on the next one, it grabs them both. I'm going to group them together so I can navigate down and click on this little folder, or just hit Control or Command G, will group them together. And I can rename it by double clicking on it. I can name it field. So now I am keeping it a little bit more organized. Now I want to darken that field down. So I'm going to go down to the bottom here to my non-destructive adjustment layers and navigate up to curves. So it's creating a curves adjustment layer above it. And right now this curves adjustment layer, since I haven't clipped it and said just affect the field, it's going to affect everything underneath it. So I can either brighten it up or darken everything down. If I click on this little icon here, it's going to link it just to this folder underneath it. And now it's just going to affect the field and that extra portion of fence that is in that field layer. So I'm going to pull it down. You can see how it's getting darker here. So say I wanted this part of the fence, this color, this density and this darkness, but the rest of this is a little bit too dark. I can actually take, it has a mask right here, so I can paint with black on the mask and make portions of that disappear. So I'm going to hit B for my brush tool, and I'm going to, since I don't have my tools showing up above here, I'm going to hit F to navigate so I can see my options across the top. I have my flow set at 30%. I'm going to start off with my flow at 30%. And slowly paint this back so you can see how it's bringing back some of that detail in the fence back here. It's a little bit less. So you can see how the edges of the field now are very dark, so it's kind of vignetting, a natural vignette to it. And this fence is a lot darker than it was, but it could still probably come down a little bit. It's not bad. What I think is distracting is maybe the color of the fence. So it's that reddish hue that's affecting the fence that's maybe not exactly what I want. So I'm going to create a hue saturation adjustment layer. So I'm going to navigate up to hue saturation, and I'm going to link it still to that field layer. So anything, it's going to link it to that curves layer, which is linked to the field layer by clicking on that little icon. And then I want to, this is too red, so I'm going to go over, navigate over to my master thing and select reds, so it's only affecting the reds. And now as I drop this down, you can see it doesn't affect the greens of the field, it's only affecting those reds and making it a little bit less saturated there, so it's not quite as distracting. So that's not bad at all. I kind of like that. So I got a hue saturation layer and a curves layer. Let's change the color balance a little bit and give it a little bit more warmth to the field also. So I'm going to again navigate down to my adjustment layers and do a color balance layer. link it to the field. And I'm going to give it a little bit of yellows, the whole thing a little bit of yellows, but that might be too much if I go too far. I'm actually put in some more reds now into the entire scene instead of just the fence. I'm navigating to using the same amount of red throughout the entire field. And something maybe like that, so like plus 13. Looked like it warmed it up enough that now it is more kind of consistent with the color of lighting that would be happening in the late afternoon sunset. So you can see how I'm using these color adjustment layers to affect specific areas of the scene by using the masks and painting with black or white to only affect on this curves layer, to only affect this portion here and some of the outside edges. Then I have the hue saturation and color balance layers to further help kind of bring those colors together. So I'm just tweaking those colors to make them look correct in that. And I can even, one other option I want to show you here, say I wanted to just grab the scoreboard here, just affect the scoreboard. So I am going to make a selection starting on the field and just grab this scoreboard. So it went over to my quick selection tool. If you recall from my last episode, that is under my W key is the quick key to navigate to your quick selection tool. I'm going around and selecting most of that here. And say I want to change the color of the scoreboard. So now I have just the scoreboard selected. And if I can create either another hue saturation adjustment layer way above, or I could create it within this field here. Either way, it's going to be linked to just the field. But because I have this selection there, it's already going to only affect just that scoreboard. It's going to create its own mask and just concentrate it right down on the scoreboard. So go down and do hue saturation. And now you can see how it created a black mask, which means that nothing else is affected except for a little pinpoint of white here, which is the scoreboard. So now as I increase saturation and move things around, you can see how it's changing the colors. I can also click colorize and really make sure it's really add a pop of color. That's obviously too much, but just for an example of how that would work. So say what color of scoreboard we want. Let's see if we can get as red of scoreboard as we can possibly get there. So there's a nice red scoreboard, and if I want to add, nope, too much saturation. So now I have you can see how I could change that to a red scoreboard in the background if I wanted to. And again, that is just affecting the scoreboard because what I did is created a selection and then created a mask. When I do it in that order, select something and then create a mask, it's going to create a mask that is only affecting that selection. So to review for you, we created a few different adjustment layers that affect specific layers and specific parts of the layer. So we have a curves adjustment layer that we created an overall curves adjustment layer linked exactly to this field and then painted some black into there so it only affected a portion. So if I disable, right click on the mask here, disable it, you can see that this entire area was darkened up, but by painting with black, it allowed some of that lightness to show back through again. I also created an overall hue saturation and color balance layer that affects the entire field again. And then I went around and selected just the scoreboard and created a mask, which created a black mask over everything that wasn't selected. So nothing else, anything in black isn't being affected. So in essence, this is a very basic composite. We extracted the field and the fence, and then we added a sky behind it, and then adjusted the color balance and the hue saturation and the levels and the curves of that field to kind of bring it into the correct density and colors of the sky. And now I could add a player in there, and to do that, it's kind of the next level, and we'll talk more about that maybe in the next version, but you're gonna have to start thinking about how the light is going to affect that player. I can't just drop any player into there. There has to be there's light coming from specific directions, and you need to match that up so that their athlete looks good or subject looks good within the scene. And that'll be our next step.